teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Jury in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial has begun deliberations. Closing arguments ended a short time ago.
If it comes to me, great, but it's not something I'm going to lobby for.
With that, how do you feel about the upcoming election?
I think that I wish I had somebody else that I could vote for.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Jury deliberation in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial has ended for the day. They'll return tomorrow as they consider the charges against the president's son. Our Scott McFarland will join us soon from Wilmington, Delaware, with more. But first, the country appears to be as politically divided as ever. New CBS News polling shows the likely rematch between President Biden and former President Donald Trump is neck and neck nationally and in the battleground states. The results come as Biden ended his D-Day trip to France with a message of unity, and Trump campaigned out west.
I think it is a measure of a country's support for democratic values that they honor those who've risked their lives and lost their lives.
If we win Nevada, we win the whole thing. We win the whole thing.
Joining me for more is CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, and our Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent, Robert Costa. Thank you both for being here to walk us through all of this. Anthony, I want to start with you and this polling. A neck-and-neck race nationally and in the battleground states. Why is this race so close right now?
Hey there, Caitlin. So let me get you caught up, and that starts with what you described at the top. This is what we in polling call a tie, because you've got Trump +1 nationally, and then you've got Biden +1 across the 7 battlegrounds, the states that'll be most decisive, we think, in this. So within the margin of error for both of those. Then the reasons for that is after the verdict, and this is our first polling of this after the verdict, first of all, context, the verdict for people does not compare to how they rank issues like the economy and inflation, issues on which Donald Trump has advantages, right? But then you do see a little bit of added motivation now among Democrats to turn out to oppose Donald Trump. So these numbers here, where Democrats now are as likely to say that they're going to turn out in the battleground, that hasn't always been the case. So Biden's got a little bit of traction activated after that. And, I'll point out a couple of demographics. I think attitudinal measures probably tell more of the story here, but these are the things people track. This is how Biden is doing. He's doing a little better with independents, a little better with women voters, with black voters. Are these his 2020 numbers? No, they're not. So he still would have a way to go there, but a little bit of improvement there, motivated again by that motivation a little bit to turn out afterwards, Caitlin.
And Bob, former President Trump has been back out on the campaign trail, freed from the courtroom in New York. But he still today had to meet with, had a probation interview for that criminal case in New York, that hush money case. What exactly was that, and how important is that in terms of sentencing that's supposed to come in July?
Former President Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee, as we all know, but he is also someone who has been convicted in Lower Manhattan of 34 felony charges, and he has to go through the process in that court just like anyone else who's been convicted of a crime. So he sat in a virtual conversation today with a probation officer to talk about his background, to give a little bit more of information on his status as a candidate, his status as a person who has maybe never been dealt with this process before. He sat alongside his lawyer, Todd Blanche, I'm told by a source, and he talked through his situation. But it's so unprecedented to see someone in his position dealing with this kind of routine criminal defendant activity. But it's very serious for Trump, not just on a legal level, but on a political level, because this sentencing on July 11th will determine whether he's facing probation as a sentence, maybe he's facing house arrest, or even time in prison. And Republicans are prepared for any sort of possibility right now. They know most defendants with his background wouldn't get a jail sentence. At the same time, Trump violated the gag order and angered the judge throughout the trial, which we covered extensively. So anything is really on the table.
And that sentencing coming just a few days before the Republican National Convention as well, of course. Anthony, we've been trying to assess how this verdict is playing with voters. Does it motivate Trump supporters? Does it motivate Biden supporters in any way? Have we learned anything about how voters are feeling about this conviction 10 days or so removed from it?
So I told you about the Democratic side. Let me show you the Republican side, right? For most of them, for 71% of Trump voters, this conviction, they say, doesn't matter. And I'll show you why in a second. But take a look at, there's about an equal number who say, among Trump voters, they're trying to show support for him after the conviction, a little added motivation there. But there's the same number who say they're voting for him in spite of this conviction. So that motivation back and forth is a wash. Now, let me show you a little bit about the way they see this as being political. We know already from previous polling that they didn't see the charges as serious throughout the trial, that they didn't see the verdict as fair. And then there's this. Even when you ask them, why do you think Donald Trump was charged in the first place, right? For independents, for Democrats to say, okay, that was decisions by local prosecutors. But for Republicans, they think that directions came from the Biden administration. So that speaks to the way they see this and the way the president has talked about this, the former president has talked about this as politically motivated. They have bought that argument. I will add this very quickly, Caitlin. Going forward, when we say to people, okay, should Donald Trump, do you want him to prosecute and investigate political opponents, maybe to get back at what they feel is political now, right, if he gets elected? And look at the difference here, where MAGA Republicans are much more likely to say they want him to do that than non-MAGA. And that speaks a little bit to these divisions within the Republican Party about what they would be after in a second potential Trump administration, Caitlin.
Yeah, and Anthony, you note about how voters, Republican voters, are kind of absorbing the rhetoric that Trump has been using against institutions, for example. Is that playing in any other way? How else are we seeing that? Yeah, because it's not just the courts, right? And it's a lot of things. We did this. It's a very broad-based question, but how do you think the political system is working? Some folks, not a lot, think it works pretty well. Most folks say it needs fundamental changes. In both of those cases, they're voting or leaning towards Joe Biden. But the ones who say the system needs complete rebuilding, they're very heavily for Donald Trump. So you pick up a little bit of that attitude towards everything is broken, everything needs major, major changes, and maybe they see former President Trump there as maybe a vehicle towards some of that. And that speaks to that loss of confidence in institutions, perhaps, that you described, Caitlin. Yeah, and Bob, speaking of that, I mean, Donald Trump now is, again, out on the campaign trail, speaking a lot about this, but also on other issues. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about workers during a rally in Las Vegas yesterday.
So this is the first time I've said this, and for those hotel workers and people that get tips, you're going to be very happy, because when I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
All right, so a lot of questions actually about how that would be done at a federal level, of course. But it's interesting that he was campaigning in Nevada, a place where union workers are, play an outsized role. The economy is still, reeling in Nevada. I'm curious kind of how you see him playing there, what you make of this kind of pitch.
So often in campaigns, we talk about the groups that represent swing voters. Who are the real targets for each of these campaigns? I always think about in 1996, it was about mothers in the suburbs, and that was a key part of that 1996 campaign, Bob Dole versus Bill Clinton. When I talk to the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign, it is so evident to me, based on my reporting, that workers, especially those who are members of a labor union, they're the swing vote. And you see, when I spoke to President Biden in Detroit for CBS Sunday Morning a few weeks ago, it was so clear Biden was going to go to Detroit to be with Sean Fain and the UAW because he knows those voters might believe that Trump's pitch on immigration and the economy is very worthwhile for them, and they might be tempted to move toward the right. And so that's why you see President Biden keep going back to Michigan, back to Pennsylvania. Every time he goes to Pennsylvania, where does he go? He meets with union workers in Philadelphia. And for former President Trump, he knows that he has an appeal to some workers, even if they have traditional Democratic ties. And he believes that that support for Biden might be soft. So he keeps going to places like Nevada, which may be a bit more tempted towards the Trump side because of the issue of immigration, and he's making his pitch.
Yeah, Nevada also, of course, huge for hospitality and an industry that is still, recovering from COVID. Fascinating arguments to watch play out in those key battlegrounds. Bob and Anthony, thank you so much for the campaign reporting and the context. We appreciate it. And a key member of Israel's war cabinet has resigned over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war. Benny Gantz is a longtime centrist and a Netanyahu critic. He joined the war cabinet after the October 7th attacks in a show of unity. In his announcement yesterday, he said that Netanyahu stands in the way of, quote, a real victory, and that bringing hostages home should be put above, quote, political survival. Gantz also called for new elections this fall. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East to push efforts to achieve a ceasefire agreement. Hamas has still not directly responded to the proposal, which was made 10 days ago. And as we said at the top of the hour, a Delaware jury has begun deliberations in the case against Hunter Biden. Our Scott McFarlane is in Wilmington for more. We'll head there next on America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports
that Desired Farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Jury deliberations are underway in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. This morning, the president's son opted not to take the witness stand. Hunter Biden faces 3 felony charges stemming from his purchase of a firearm in 2018, while prosecutors alleged he was addicted to crack cocaine. He faces up to 25 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, a new CBS News poll finds 50% of people say Hunter Biden will be treated better than other defendants. Our Scott McFarland has been covering the trial for us, and he's outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware. Scott, good to see you. I know you've been following this case since the beginning. What do you make of Hunter Biden not taking the stand in this case?
Not a gallivanting surprise to court watchers and those with whom we spoke who are legal analysts and legal experts. He would have exposed himself to an untold number of cross-examination questions that might have heightened his his legal risk and also supercharged the politics behind this case. The jury here spent about an hour deliberating before the judge sent them home to return at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. That was after about 3 hours of closing arguments and a 6-day trial. The closing arguments really were a crystallization of what the defense had been trying to argue through its cross-examination through the course of the trial, trying to make this case that though Hunter Biden acknowledges buying a gun in October 2018 and acknowledges having been an addict to crack cocaine before then, that he may have considered himself on the road to recovery in October 2018 or getting sober so that he didn't make a false statement when he bought the gun and did not claim that he was a drug user or drug addict. It's one of the things the jury will have to wrestle with as they resume deliberations tomorrow morning here at the federal courthouse in Wilmington.
And you mentioned the closing arguments of the defense. What about the prosecution?
They leaned in hard on all the text messages they showed over the 6-day trial and the testimony from Hunter Biden's ex-wife, the widow of his late brother Beau Biden, and his former girlfriend, all of whom testified that he acknowledged drug addiction, including in 2018. They made the argument that text messages, even from that critical month, October 2018, indicate he was either buying or using drugs. And they emphasized what Hallie Biden said. She was Beau Biden's widow. She had a romantic relationship with Hunter when the gun was purchased. She found that gun and threw it away 11 days after it was purchased and testified she found the gun in Hunter's truck near drug residue. A weight-bearing allegation for prosecutors here. The 6-man, 6-woman Delaware jury, Caitlin, not only watched the case, but in the front row, right behind Hunter Biden, throughout the course of this trial. They saw the First Lady. They saw other members of the Biden family prominently in the courtroom. And the prosecution, as it began its closing argument today, Caitlin, told the jury, pay no attention to those who've gathered, to the media circus outside or the prominent people inside. Pay strict attention simply to the facts and the case.
Yes, certainly some high-profile guests there, to be sure. I know the president did not make an appearance in that courtroom, but as you mentioned, the First Lady did. Can you kind of take us inside the courtroom as you've been seeing it? I mean, there's been such emotional testimony from such close members of the family, like Hunter Biden's daughter recently.
This is just different than other trials for any number of reasons. First of all, it's the first ever criminal trial involving a sitting president's child. Let's put that aside for a moment. Just the dynamics in the courtroom were distinctive here. For 6 days, this was consistently and unambiguously sad, emotional. It was a human tragedy. Somebody being in the throes of addiction and watching his relationships break apart during and potentially because of that addiction. A daughter testifying about her dad being an addict. An ex-wife talking about how crack cocaine helped break apart a marriage. And then his brother's widow, not only describing that key month of October 2018 and that gun purchase, but the relationship she undertook with Hunter Biden and how he introduced her to crack cocaine after Beau Biden's death as well. There was not a moment of levity or lightheartedness in this trial. Some criminal cases, some have moments where the pace changes. This has just been sad from the jump.
And have you seen kind of the reaction from others in the room? I mean, I'm curious. Obviously, we all want to know how the jury will react, but any sort of indications? And also, do we know, how long these deliberations could potentially last?
Yeah, predicting a jury is always like trying to win the lottery. It's the odds are against you succeeding. But here's a few things we can tell you for sure. The jury was clearly attentive during seminal moments of this trial. This was not a boring set of testimony. This was visceral, emotive, cutting testimony. It commanded your interest and it commanded the jury's interest. We saw so many of them dutifully taking notes, sitting upright in their seats, attentive, clearly attentive to what was happening. But it was also a brief trial. 6 days is no marathon. It's not short, but it's not painfully long. But it was a captivating set of testimony, and this jury bared that out based on what we saw.
Yeah, as we underwent 7 weeks of Trump's trial, this seems short in comparison for sure. But Scott MacFarlane, I know you will be standing by, as will we, when the jury returns tomorrow. Thank you very much.
How do you feel about the upcoming election?
I think that I wish I had somebody else that I could vote for.
And some voters are still struggling to make a presidential pick. We're in Nevada next to hear from Americans still weighing their options. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered. There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Former President Donald Trump is back on the East Coast today after spending the past several days campaigning out west. The Republican presidential nominee, the presumptive nominee, traveled across Southern California for his first major campaign fundraising swing this election cycle. He attended events in San Francisco, Beverly Hills, and Newport Beach. And yesterday, he held his first official rally since his felony conviction. Hundreds withstood scorching temperatures in Las Vegas to hear the former president speak. And our own Olivia Rinaldi joins us now from Sin City. Olivia, good to see you. Thanks for all your reporting over the weekend. I know you've been covering Trump, but also talking to a lot of voters on the ground there. What have they been saying? How are they feeling about this election?
Yeah, Caitlin, I did have the opportunity to speak with a lot of voters here in Nevada over the last several days. We are in a battleground state, and Biden and Trump, both of their campaigns, have already spent a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of effort here on the ground. And we still have 5 months to go until Election Day. So I went up to some suburbs outside of the Strip here in Las Vegas to see how this is actually playing with voters on the ground.
I'm still doing my research. I mean, you know, definitely not a Trump fan at all by any means, but I'm just trying to figure out who's going to do the best for the people.
Every time, every election we have, I want a red-blooded American apple candidate, and what we get is a kiwi and a banana to choose from. And, you know, I just want a president who actually understands that the job of being a president is for all Americans, not your political party.
Now, that's just a snippet there of some of the voters I talked to, but overwhelmingly the feeling was pretty much the same of all the people I talked to. They're a little bit unhappy about their choices. They're feeling a little bit dejected. You know, to borrow from that man's kiwi, apple, and banana analogy there, a lot of Americans kind of felt like they ate their vegetables 4 years ago. You know, they were treating it as if it were a referendum on Donald Trump. Now, 4 years later, they have to make the same choice between Biden and Trump again, and a lot of them just don't feel very enthusiastic or happy about that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out come November 5th.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That's something I haven't heard yet before. And it's so important that you're talking to these voters, Olivia, because these are the people that are going to be making the decision about who could be the next president. I mean, Nevada is such a key battleground state, especially this time around. It could make or break whoever hopes to become president. I'm curious kind of how you've seen that in your reporting. You know, Trump was there over the weekend, and kind of how you think that the campaign is seeing Nevada in terms of their trajectory over the next few months.
They're feeling very confident here in Nevada. I will tell you that this is Trump's third visit to the state. He just had a full West Coast tour. I know you were out in Phoenix with me a few days ago. He kicked off there, and then he went on to Southern California for a couple of fundraisers, and then ended with a fundraiser and then a rally here in Las Vegas. Again, it's his third visit. So the campaign tells me they feel quite good here. The numbers here are pretty staggering for Trump, having him up, you know, plus 8 points in some polls. Our CBS polling shows him up here as well. So they're feeling quite confident there. But I will say a Republican has not won Nevada since 2004. There's been a very ongoing Democratic machine here called the Harry Reid machine, named after the late senator, where it's just been unions moving together. Their ground game has worked very well for Democrats in the past. Trump is hoping to really break that apart in this election cycle and hoping to cement really that Nevada is going to be a Republican state going forward.
Yeah, a lot of competition there, but that would be history-making indeed. Olivia, I know you were covering all of this in extreme heat conditions as a heat wave. It was not only there, but also in Arizona, where you also were as well. So thank you for being on the trail with us.
Thank you.
J.D. Vance is a long-rumored option to be Trump's VP pick. What the Ohio senator is saying about being on the short list. Our political panel is standing by to take a closer look at the Veep stakes. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels. 100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door. This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Donald Trump is neck and neck with President Biden across the states that will likely determine the outcome of the 2024 election, and that includes Georgia. And that's where we find our own Torian Small. Torian, I know you've been out there speaking to voters in this critical battleground state, including some Democrats who are quite critical of President Biden. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, Caitlin, especially as we're 5 months away from the presidential election, I wanted to gauge where enthusiasm among Biden's base, so voters, both women and black voters, felt about the current president, especially as he faces an uphill battle here in retaining this state that only recently, just in 2020, flipped for a Democrat. The last time we saw that was Bill Clinton in 1992. So Democrats across the board I spoke with, not just here in Atlanta, but in northern, the metro area in Smyrna and Marietta, they told me they had concerns about Biden's performance so far, and that could impact how they vote in November. Take a listen to what a few of them had to say.
Unless Joe Biden does something that really makes me feel like it was worth voting for him again, he'll have to do something. He's not just going to get my vote because he's a Democrat.
The only reason people are voting for you is because they have no hope for a third party. And if you don't shape up, then there are going to be people who don't vote. There are going to be people who don't vote for a third party, and it's going to ruin your chances, and you won't be able to get in office, and you won't be able to beat Trump. So just shape up, dude.
Those voters certainly don't speak for every Democrat out here, but I found those to be the most poignant. They had a pretty direct message to the president telling him that he has to earn their vote. But the Biden administration, or the Biden campaign, has been pretty active in campaigning out here in Georgia. In fact, Vice President Kamala Harris will be out here to speak fairly soon, this week actually, at the 100 Black Men annual conference.
Yeah, I think the phrase "shape up, dude" is as straightforward as you can get, Torian. What about voters and how they're thinking about President Trump? What did they have to say, former President Trump?
Well, a lot of voters tell me they're concerned, Democrats I talk to tell me they're concerned about his recent criminal conviction, emboldening his base. We, of course, know the campaign has announced they've raised a record number of money following that guilty verdict. And they're seeing, at least in their circles, Republicans rally around the former president because of that. Now, there was an independent voter I talked to today who was a recent Republican who decided to vote for Biden in the last election, and she's also holding on to Biden this time around, even though she doesn't find him to be the most favorable candidate. only because she refuses to support Trump. Take a listen to what she had to say about her former party.
It's not the Republican Party I grew up with, and it's the Trump Party, and they believe everything he says. So that scares me. It does. But I hope there's enough independents and newly progressive voters to win Georgia.
Yeah, the effort to win Georgia is certainly going to be a challenge for Biden. Again, he just nearly won it in 2020 by fewer than 12,000 votes. This is a game of margin, so he's going to have to do some serious coalition building, that same winning 2020 coalition, in order for him to cross the finish line again here in the Peach State.
Yeah, tall order. We'll see what happens in the next 5 months. Torian Small, thank you so much for sharing your reporting. And Joel Payne and Matt Gorman join us now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist, and Matt is a Republican strategist who served as a senior advisor to Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign. Gentlemen, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. So we have this new polling in the battleground states and nationally. We have a neck race. And, you know, we expected this race to be close. Can't imagine that it's going to change that much over the next 5 months. And I just keep thinking all the money that is likely to be spent, and we're going to have a virtually tied race. I mean, is there anything, I mean, for both of you, is there anything that you think either candidate can do to change the trajectory of their...
Go for it. Yeah, I'm happy to start. So, you know, I was listening to that conversation you were having with Turian there and just his conversations with voters. And I noticed both of those voters in the first part were labeled Democrats. And the first woman said, he's going to have to do something to earn my vote. And to me, that's the whole ballgame for Joe Biden right now. There are these nervous Democrats who he's having a hard time wrangling. And if you notice the fall off in public opinion that Biden's been experiencing, it's been with core constituencies. It's not with independents per se or moderates. He'll get to those folks. He's got to lock down his base and consolidate his base. That's something Donald Trump has done well. He had a primary process to do that. Joe Biden, not necessarily. So when you talk about like the tightening we've seen in CBS polls and you know, all the things that we've seen in terms of the race showing to be neck and neck, I think it's because voters are starting to, you know, line in on the fact that it's going to be Biden and Trump, and these are my choices, and it's a binary choice. And I think that's what Biden is hoping to do. That's why he challenged Trump on the debate. That's why Kamala Harris is challenging the unnamed VP candidate to clarify the stakes.
In short, the debate, right? The gambit they did about a month ago, maybe a little bit more, was the first time the Biden campaign realized they need to change the trajectory of where things were going. They were on a glide path at that point to being down 2 or 3 points consistently. It's tightened a little bit, but the debate and what happens after, I think, could be one of the few things that changes the trajectory in one way or another.
Yeah, seeing these two candidates who everybody, you know, knows are going to be the candidates, seeing them on stage together, it will be quite something. To your point, too, Joel, about motivating the base. In our polling, it was interesting because you're seeing kind of the motivating factors for either side are to oppose the other candidate, this kind of negative partisanship that we've seen kind of in politics for a while now. But it was interesting because back in March, 47% of Biden voters said that their main reason for voting for Biden was to oppose Trump. Now that number is 54%. I'm curious kind of what you make of that increase, and would that be okay for Democrats to say, look, this campaign is about opposing Donald Trump?
That's exactly right. If you talk to a lot of smart Democrats, what they will tell you is the coalition you're building is an anti-Trump coalition. You're not necessarily building a pro-Biden coalition. So the rally effect you're seeing, it's not necessarily a rally for President Biden. It's a rally against Donald Trump. And that is what Democrats are banking on this time around.
And Matt, I mean, Trump doesn't have that problem that you're describing Biden has with his own base of support. I mean, we've not only seen his base be strong, but Republicans who were kind of reluctant to support him have pretty much come around.
Yeah. And it follows the same playbook. We saw this in 2016 as well. It's a lot easier for them to come home. I think there was a consternation, or at least a hope maybe among Democrats, that there would be some Nikki Haley contingent of voters that would hold themselves off. But I think what we're seeing is those Nikki Haley voters that showed up in the primary, they probably didn't vote for Trump in 2020 and maybe not even in 2016. So what it was maybe a value add to get Haley voters in the tent. Maybe if Nikki Haley, you know, maybe that's another 5 or so points, but it's not subtracting from Trump's total. And I think that is the crucial difference here. Those Republican voters came home.
And, another obviously huge issue this election cycle is going to be immigration. I just got back from Arizona covering the campaigns there. And in our polling, too, we saw that 70% of registered voters approved of Biden's executive order on migrants crossing the border related to asylum laws last week. Joel, what do you make of that? And do you think Biden, by this executive order, is that enough? Or are Democrats still concerned about this issue?
I think it's probably enough right now politically for Biden. It does create problems for him on his left flank. There are a lot of progressive groups who feel like the president somewhat played into Donald Trump's hands by, essentially rubber stamping some policies that a lot of progressives thought they shouldn't have done in the Trump administration. Now Biden's replicating some of them. But I think what Biden is hoping is to get caught trying, and he doesn't mind necessarily getting some critique from his left because that's going to help him in the middle.
Yeah, does that give him any sort of padding when it comes to this election? Or are Republicans, obviously 70% approve suggests that Republicans are approving.
We're going to still talk about abortion immigration as an issue as a whole. What you're seeing is abortion and immigration are being issues, one that the other party wants to tout and the other party doesn't want to talk about. It's a matter of which side tends to use that issue, Republicans immigration, the left with abortion, to their own advantage. I think it shows how much the issue has shifted, that Biden felt he needed to do something, anything on border security, than nothing, and viewing it as a political vulnerability.
Yeah, and those two issues are going to come head on the ballot in Arizona specifically. Joel and Matt, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And nearly 2 years since the fall of Roe, a new book examines a decades-long effort by conservatives to overturn abortion rights in the U.S. We'll speak to its authors next. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth. Right now. We got something crazy. And reach for the stars. Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
On 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This month marks 2 years since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a landmark ruling that has been galvanizing voters ever since. A newly published book entitled The Fall of Roe, The Rise of a New America reveals the political maneuvering that came before that decision. And the authors join us now, Lisa Lair and Elizabeth Dias. They are both journalists for the New York Times. Thank you both for being here, and really congratulations on this book. I'm really excited to talk to you both. Elizabeth, I want to start with you because you and Lisa reveal this untold story, in quotes, about the network that took down Roe. This is a fascinating part of this book. Tell us what you found.
Sure. Thank you so much. Our book, The Fall of Roe, really documents, like you said, the untold story of how Roe was overturned. And we found this network of conservatives, mostly Christian conservatives, who over the past 10 years developed new strategies, had a few lucky breaks, but were able to go from what they thought was the lowest point in their movement when they would not be able to overturn Roe. That was actually, it's hard to imagine, but that's where they were about 10 years ago. And things completely changed over this time period to where they were able to overturn Roe v. Wade. It was a combination of local activists, state lawmakers, and some high-powered lawyers and activists. And our book really it documents this first narrative, right? It's this first look at what this pivotal decade, what we call the last decade of the Roe era in American life. We document, what actually happened there. This is the topic that's easy to quickly become polemical. And we felt it was really important to take this seriously, to actually listen to who the players were on all sides of this, and to really just get a common set of facts down to start to understand where we have been and where we're going as a country.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, what's fascinating here, at least to me, was the legal strategy behind all of this, and how long it took, but really how strategic they were about bringing certain cases forward to get this to the Supreme Court. I mean, as you also document, this is something that conservatives have been pushing for decades, of course. But I'm also curious, kind of what you make of how liberals were essentially caught off guard here.
Well, I think for a long time, for Republicans and Democrats, certainly for the abortion rights movement, there was a widespread belief that Roe would stand. And the idea that this precedent that had been part of American life for 2 generations, part of how people planned their families, could suddenly disappear felt hard to wrap your head around. So I think certainly among voters, there was really a widespread sense of denial as conservatives inched forward, passing restrictions in conservative state houses, moving them up through the courts. It was really hard for the public to put that together into a narrative, which is really what we've done in this book, document how they did all that and how all those different pieces fit together. But that was something that was really hard for the public to see because it happened so piecemeal. And then in terms of the abortion rights movement, I think once you get Donald Trump in office and he gets awfully lucky and gets these 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, it becomes something that's almost impossible for them to stop because it's just moving up from these conservative state houses. These restrictions are inching their way through the court system to a Supreme Court that really in such a short period turned dramatically against abortion rights. So in some ways, I think there was this sense of denial, but there also became this movement like a growing snowball that became almost impossible to stop.
And Elizabeth, we've seen obviously how this issue now has galvanized especially Democratic voters or voters towards the Democrats in some ways. And obviously we'll see the biggest test of that this election cycle. But I'm curious how the anti-abortion movement is preparing for what's next.
Right. It's such an important question because the foundation of Roe for 50 years has completely, totally shifted. The ground that they had been able to build their strategies on, kind of the way political dynamics just worked in every presidential election, right? It was a mobilizing issue for Republicans. That groundwork is totally different now. And we're really in an unprecedented time when we're seeing the abortion issue really mobilize Democratic voters in new ways. It's presenting new challenges for the anti-abortion movement. They'd been so strategic, thinking in generational, long sort of arcs for how they planned. But now that sense of denial that Lisa was talking about, that's really been shattered, right? So they no longer have the benefit of that as one of their key assets that enabled them to move forward. So now that the American public generally understands that not only did they overturn Roe, but their end goal here is much bigger, right? It's not just stopping with ending Roe. It's going for the complete end of abortion, period. And that's not a popular position. In fact, it's a minority position, a big minority. There's a very small amount of them. So they're up against new challenges.
Well, a perfect time for this book, and I'm excited for you both on the release. Congratulations, Elizabeth and Lisa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And far-right parties are celebrating major wins after the elections for the European Parliament. What are the biggest gains being made? That's next. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here? What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis? You're not answering my question.
This really is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Far-right parties have made major gains in European Union parliamentary elections. In France, President Emmanuel Macron's party suffered a blistering defeat, and as a result, he dissolved the country's parliament and is calling for a snap election. Semaphore senior editor Prashant Rao joins us now from London. Prashant, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. So first, let's start with what exactly the EU Parliament actually does.
So the European Parliament has a number of functions in the European political system. It's not the place where all the legislation gets decided. That Europe, as is common, has a multifaceted, needlessly complex system. But among the things it does is it vets the commissioners, so the de facto cabinet of the European Commission. It will certainly scrutinize and vote on legislation that covers all of Europe, but individual member states retain a lot of individual powers to do with, justice, policing, home affairs, their own foreign policy. But it has grown in power in the in the years past.
So how will what we saw here have a general impact on how this parliament governs?
In a number of ways. One, it sets the tone, obviously, for the region's politics. And so just from a sort of ephemeral point, it has that kind of narrative value. But then from a more practical sense, we saw the euro fall. We saw, in terms of markets, we saw carbon markets actually fall. And, sort of carbon trading. That's kind of a proxy to show that I think people are a little bit worried that Europe's Green Deal is likely in a bit of trouble. We might see harder pushes against immigration. That's been obviously a big sort of issue for the far right across the region. So there will be some policy impacts, certainly.
And let's talk about this kind of ascension of the far right. Has this been something that has been brewing for some time, or what were some of the big policy issues really driving this?
It has been brewing for quite some time. Progressively in, I would say the past 10 years, far right parties across the region have made sort of steady gains. In France, Marine Le Pen hold neck and neck with President Emmanuel Macron's party. The last set of European Parliament elections, in this set of elections, of course, her party trounced Macron's party. So there have been a lot of these kinds of long-term trends, and then they were, I would say, buffeted by a series of changes across the European Union, as well as individual issues. As an example, in Germany, just a couple weeks before the election, a police officer was among those stabbed by a man who is alleged to be a migrant. And that has really kind of turbocharged the immigration debate in Germany. So there have been a combination of individual issues, long-term trends, and kind of block-wide, I wouldn't say moves against immigration, but certainly a hardening of attitudes.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about Macron calling for this snap election. I'm curious what you make of it, and is there a gamble here? I mean, given what you just recalled for us about Le Pen.
So yes to all of that, basically. Very few political observers in France and very few sort of senior politicians had anticipated what was about to happen. The mayor of Paris was caught off guard. Members of Macron's own cabinet, his own party were caught off guard. They did not anticipate that he would call this election. But there are a few sort of driving factors behind it. Macron was possibly going to face a vote of no confidence later in the year. He doesn't actually have a parliamentary majority anyway. So there were a lot of domestic political pressures against him. There is, of course, the argument that France had parliamentary elections. You don't need to have them again. But the narrative power of Le Pen's success would have meant that her party would have been pushing for them. So he, in some ways, gets on the front foot here. There are also some factors that mitigate against Le Pen's party succeeding to the extent that they succeeded in the European Parliament, to do with the sort of French national electoral system versus the European Parliament's electoral system. So Macron may also be gambling that due to a variety of factors on a national level, his party will perform better than it did on a European level.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we'll see how that shakes out. I mean, how should Americans be viewing all of this? What kind of impact could this have on EU-U.S. relations?
So first off, I think it's important to say that it wasn't a unitary rise of the far right. There were a few countries, Hungary, Sweden among them, Belgium, in which the far right did not perform as well as anticipated. I think, though, on the whole, this will have an impact because, principally, as I said earlier, the European Parliament scrutinizes the commissioners, who are sort of the part of the European Union's kind of de facto executive arm, the European Commission. And so those are the people who, make visits to Washington. They conduct Europe-wide policy and propose Europe-wide policy. They are the ones who will make antitrust investigations. And so this will have sort of a direct impact on relations with the United States. Of course, American tech companies have had not the best relations with Europe's antitrust agencies. And so there will be tangible policy impacts down the line for the United States, American companies, things like that.
Right. Okay. We will stay tuned, and they will be watching our elections coming up here in just 5 months as well. Prashant Rao, thank you so much for your time and reporting. We appreciate it. It has been 60 years since the Senate spent 60 days debating the Civil Rights Act of 1964. As the Washington Post noted this morning, it was on this day in 1964 that the Senate ended the filibuster led by Southern Democrats and opposed by their counterparts in the North. The law provided protection of voting rights, banned discrimination in public facilities, and established equal employment opportunity. It passed finally in the Senate with 73 yes votes. Here's President Lyndon Johnson giving remarks at the bill signing on July 2nd.
I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people.
And as Johnson signed that bill, he gave one of his pens to civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. And that does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for June 10th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The rise of the right wing. In European Parliament elections, French and German leaders lose out to supporters for hardline policies on immigration and climate. We'll take stock of the shift. 4 Israeli hostages taken by Hamas were rescued.